Welcome to Clinical Histology. I'm Dr. Xie from SUMC. In this session, we are going to explore our body's hardest working organ, the heart. By the end of this session, you are able to describe the cardiovascular system, the components of the heart wall, and the composition of cardiac conducting system. The heart, as a muscular pumping organ, propels blood at high pressure throughout the cardiovascular system. As illustrated in this figure, human cardiovascular system has two separate circulations, the pulmonary circulation and the systemic circulation. Through pulmonary circulation, as shown in upper part of this figure, heart pumps deoxygenated blood to and retrieve oxygenated blood from the lungs. Through the systemic circulation, as depicted in the lower part of this figure, the heart pumps to distribute oxygenated blood to all of the tissues and organs in the body, except the lungs, and receives deoxygenated blood from them. As we see in this coronal section, the heart contains four chambers, a right atrium and ventricle, and a left atrium and ventricle. For each side, the top atrium and the bottom ventricle are separated by a atrioventricular valve. Those one-way valves are designed to keep proper blood flow from the atrium to the ventricle below. The right and the left atria receive blood from the vena cava and the pulmonary veins, respectively. The right and the left ventricles propel blood into the pulmonary and the systemic circulation, respectively. Because strong force is required to squeeze blood into the pulmonary and the systemic circulations, the walls of ventricles are much thicker than those of arteries. The muscular wall of the atrium and the ventricles contracts and relaxes sequentially to facilitate the circulation of blood in the cardiovascular system. However, how does your heart beat? And furthermore, how does your heart beat rhythmically and autonomously? Let's try to find the answers by going through the structures of the heart. At the histological level, the cellular features of the heart play a critical role in normal cardiac functions. The walls of both atria and ventricles are composed of three major layers: the very thin inner endocardium, the thick middle myocardium, and the relatively thin outer epicardium, which are embryonically equivalent to the tunica intima, tunica media, and the tunica adventitia of the blood vessels, respectively. Each of these three layers will be discussed in detail. The endocardium lines the lumen of the heart and provides protection to the heart chambers. The endocardium is composed of two layers: the endothelial layer, highlighted by the blue line, and the subendothelial connective tissue layer, spanned by the black line. The subendothelial connective tissue layer can be further divided into two parts: the inner dense connective tissue layer, lying just beneath the endothelium, spanned by the green line in this figure, and the loose connective tissue layer, found deep to the dense connective tissue layer, which is called the subendocardium, spanned by the yellow line. The subendocardial layer merges with the myocardium. Branches of the heart's impulse conducting system, namely the Purkinje fibers, are embedded in the subendocardial layer, as indicated by the green arrows. In fact, the Purkinje fibers are modified cardiac muscle fibers. As we see in this section, Purkinje fibers are distinguished from the normal cardiac muscle fibers by their greater diameter and more sparse bundles of myofibrils in the peripheral part of the cells. We will come back to the Purkinje fibers in a heart conducting system in a few minutes. Now, let's recall what we have learned about the cardiac muscle fibers. They are branched and joined with each other end to end by intercalated discs, as we see on the left. Branched cardiac muscle fibers interweave in spiral layers around each heart chamber, forming the thickest layer of the heart wall, namely the myocardium, as marked by the green line in the right figure. The interweaving and spiraling cardiac muscle fibers allow the myocardium to produce efficient contraction, squeezing the heart chamber to pump blood out. Before we move on to the outermost layer of the heart wall, it will be helpful to review the pericardium. The pericardium is a tough double-layered fibrous sac that encapsulates the muscular heart and the root of great vessels. It has an external layer known as the fibrous pericardium and an internal layer known as the serous pericardium. The serous pericardium is itself divided into two layers, the outer parietal layer and the inner visceral layer. The space between the parietal and the visceral layer is the pericardial cavity, containing a thin film of lubricating fluid, which serves to minimize friction during cardiac movements. The parietal layer of serous pericardium is continuous with the fibrous pericardium, and there is no space between them. Now, let's see the visceral layer of serous pericardium. As you see in this figure, it is actually the outermost layer of the heart wall, namely the epicardium. The outer surface of epicardium is lined by a layer of simple squamous epithelium, known as the mesothelium. The mesothelial cells secrete a lubricating fluid into the pericardial cavity. As mentioned above, this fluid ensures that there is no friction during heart movement. Beneath the mesothelium is a supporting layer of loose connective tissue with blood vessels, nerves, and adipocytes. The atria and the ventricles contract and relax alternately in a precisely coordinated way that is made possible by the cardiac conducting system. The cardiac conducting system is actually a network of modified cardiac muscle fibers embedded in heart wall. It is composed of two nodes, the sinoatrial or SA node and the atrioventricular node or AV node, followed by the bundle of his bundle branches and Purkinje fibers, as illustrated in this figure in blue. The SA node is located in the right atrium near the entrance of the superior vena cava. As the pacemaker of heart, SA node fires electric impulse that spread throughout both right and left atria and stimulate them to contract simultaneously. The contraction of atria squeezes blood into the ventricles. The only way the electric impulses can go down from the atria to the ventricles is via the AV node, which is located in the floor of right atrium. The AV node is followed by the specialized bundle of his. This bundle further divides into right and left bundle branches that run along the interventricular septum to the apex of the heart. At the apex, the bundle branches continue to subdivide into conducting fibers, also known as Purkinje fibers, which transmit impulses to the cardiac muscle cells in the ventricles. Because the impulse arrives at the apex first and then spread throughout the ventricular myocardium, ventricles contract in a bottom-up manner, which squeeze blood into either the aorta or pulmonary artery. If you are interested in more details of cardiac contractions, I refer you to the physiology books or our online clinical physiology sessions. Inflammation is the body's response to harmful stimuli, such as infections or injuries. Inflammation in the heart can lead to serious heart damage or health problems. There are three primary types of heart inflammation corresponding to the layers of heart wall: endocarditis, myocarditis, and pericarditis. Endocarditis refers to inflammations of the endocardium. Myocarditis is the inflammation of the heart muscles in the myocardium, while pericarditis is inflammation of the pericardium. Let's have a look at the pericarditis. This diagram shows the histopathology of pericarditis. In normal heart, as we discussed above and shown in Figure A, the pericardial cavity is filled with a small amount of lubricant. Upon infection, inflammation may lead to the thickening of the pericardium or the adhesion between the epicardium and the parietal layer of the pericardium, which will severely hamper proper cardiac movements. In this session, we have discussed the cardiovascular system and the structural basis of the heart that fulfill its role as a rhythmically pumping organ. Three major layers constitute the heart wall. The endocardium and epicardium line the inner and outer surface of the heart, respectively. The myocardium forms a thick muscular layer between the endo and epicardium. Specialized myocardial fibers embedded in the heart wall make up the cardiac conducting system, including the SA and AV nodes, bundle heads, bundle branches, and Purkinje fibers. They initiate the normal cardiac cycle and coordinate the contraction of the heart chamber. That's all for today. Thank you for joining us. Hope to see you soon.